Aruna, payye start idala. Can start. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope my screen is visible. If yes, can you guys give me a quick thumbs up so that I know that you guys can see what I'm sharing? Okay. Awesome. Really. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes, guys. So before, we have been discussing about psychology and UX. I know that we had a long 1 week gap. So I don't know how many of you all remember whatever we discussed. What we're going to do is we'll do a quick recap of whatever things that we discussed in a previous session, because today also we are going to have a continuation of whatever we discussed, because I don't know if you remember, we were discussing a framework and then we had stopped in between. So I will be continuing with that same framework again today, because that is the most important thing that we need to discuss. So that, and let's do a quick recap. Okay. What did we discuss last time? We started off by discussing how our brain thinks, right? Before that, we started understanding about what is the importance of psychology in UX, as in why should we even discuss about this whole concept of psychology, right? Because it is something that might sound very different and something that is not very related to UX. So we try to understand why we need to understand psychology, especially when it comes to user experience. We also discussed about how our brain thinks. We discussed about this concept known as dual process theory, where I'm not going through the slides again because it's going to be repetitive. So I'll just quickly tell you what we were discussing. So we discussed about dual process theory, which talks about two systems in our brain. So which basically said that we have system 1 and system 2. System 1 is your system that instantly reacts to things that you see. It's slower, but it's instant. System 1 is faster, it's instant. System 2 is much more slower, but it's more logical, right? We had discussed all those things. We saw different examples. We saw, how one system weighs over the other, what are its strengths, what are its weaknesses, right? After that, we started discussing this framework known as bias framework: log, interpret, act, and store, because that is the core concept in this module. So Adilum, we had discussed the first two concepts. We saw a lot of examples in block. Block basically means that our brain blocks most of the information that we see, and how our brands leveraging that feature to make sure that their experience is better over the others. Are the slides changing? Not yet. I'm just giving you a quick recap of whatever we discussed. Other than it, I'll start sharing today's session. And we also discussed about interpret. So I said that first step is that our brain blocks a lot of information. Second step is that our brain interprets things that grabs its attention, right? So these are the two things that comes under bias framework. So from today, we will start discussing the next step in the bias framework, which is known as ACT, right? So today, primarily, we will continue to our discussion on this bias framework. We will also look at few more examples, because I believe as UX designers, what we really need to understand is how others are doing things differently, and that is the best way to learn UX, according to me. Last time discuss we will go through a lot of examples. We will try to understand how different brands are incorporating these concepts into their products to make sure that they stand one step above the others, right? So moving on to today's session, we'll start by understanding how we act, right? Because as I said, our brain does 4 different things when we see something: block, that is step 1; interpret, step 2; third is act. Now coming to act, what happens is, as UX designers or even as product owners, നമ്മൾ കണ്ടുവരുന്ന ഒരു behavioral change എന്താന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ, people have very short attention span nowadays, especially when it's about consuming information online. Okay, people are very restless. They just quickly want to see a lot of information. They quickly want to act on different information, uh, and brands know this, and people who are working on products, people who have been working on products, know this behavioral change better. And when we look around, we can actually see a lot of examples. My dad, who goes to office every day, he comes back in the evening, and as soon as he's back, fully phone and he'll start watching different YouTube shorts. And he continuously watches shorts for almost 1.5 hours, right? So other land different examples, we know that people are very addictive to Instagram reels. Reels madanneyana, right? Short 15-second video. And there are more such examples. Let's say you have something known as an InShots app. InShots app, I don't know how many of you have heard about InShots. So people who read a lot of news must be having this app installed in your phone. You have bite-sized, small news shown as one card. So you just have to swipe through each of this news, unlike your conventional, your Times of India or the Hindu. So in general, what I'm trying to tell you is, our behavior has changed a lot. We quickly want to see things. We quickly want to act on things, right? That is how we have been behaviorally changing over time. Now, keeping this in mind, let's understand few strategies that will help us as designers to make sure that our users reach their goals faster. And that is what primarily we are going to discuss under how we act. Okay. Moving on. Now, the first strategy is reducing friction, which is very basic, very intuitive, right? We all know what friction is. Now, as I said, this might seem like a very basic and intuitive thing, but what really happens is we as humans, we have our own ways of doing things, right? We are wired to do certain things in certain ways. And all of us are very different. We have our own ways of doing things. Even if you take one single app, the way in which two persons interact with the same app is entirely different, right? If we have a lot of interactions, right? If we make people do a lot, it immediately puts them off, right? Our brain blocks most of the information, right? Something that we already discussed. So let's try to understand how we can actually reduce friction when it comes to designing applications or when it comes to designing digital interfaces, okay? The first step that we need to understand, before that, so there is a psychology insight called Hicks law. I think we have pretty much covered this in blog. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, we had understood this law. So today we'll understand how this is actually being used in certain applications, okay? So what happens is, as I said, to reduce friction, the first thing that we need to take care of is to make sure that we are removing options or reducing the steps. So let's try to understand this by an example. I hope you guys can see the flowchart. Before 2016, right, before the whole world of UPI was introduced, we had something known as net banking. I don't know if people use net banking anymore. I guess older people are still using it. But net banking, we were doing a lot of micro transactions, right? Transactions online, or otherwise it was mostly cash virtual transactions offline, but online we were just doing transactions using net banking. Let's try to understand how a transaction works using this flowchart. What I've made here is known as a flowchart. You will learn more about flowcharts probably in your fourth module, where you will learn about information architecture, okay? But that is for some other day. But let's try to understand step-by-step process involved in making a transaction through a net banking, right? So the first step was obviously to open the app. We all do that, right? Net banking, boom, we go to SBI's portal, our favorite net banking partners. We go to their website or open their application. Then we had to enter login credentials. Now, login credentials, remember, we had to enter a lot of things, right? We had to remember our username, because SBI back then had, I think SBI still has a username. We have to enter passwords, we have the OTP, where we have to validate the OTP. Then to transfer money, let's say I have to transfer 100 rupees to Arun, I have to go to funds transfer number or the feature option. And within funds transfer also, there were a lot of options within that. There was some NEFT, IMPS, I don't even remember. I'm going to correct which I still don't know what it is, right? But we always did NEFT because people asked us to do NEFT transactions, okay? And then other selected data, then we had to enter the recipient details. Now, recipient details, the details of the sender, sorry, the receiver, whoever is receiving this transaction. From Arun Angle, I have to enter Arun's account number, I have to enter Arun's IFSC number. Sometimes they even ask us to enter branch name, some branch details like MICR code and all those things that were also being, that was also asked to enter during those days. We had to enter amount and then confirm. So to make a small transaction that hardly takes any steps, these were the number of steps that a user had to follow. And within each step also, we had a lot of options, right? So which is very taxing. Like, which transaction chain should we really do a lot of these things is something nobody thought of. So, net banking highly lag out, UPI option just posted. Yeah, exactly. So post 2016, when this whole amazing architecture called UPI was introduced, this entire thing got done in 4 steps, like Arun had exactly mentioned. But very simple. Like, just open the app, select your sender, recipient. If he's already there in your contacts, you can select his contact, or else you can just scan a QR, enter a number. There are plenty ways to do this, right? So you do that, you enter amount. It's as simple as that, and you just confirm. So there was no need to, enter a lot of additional details which was earlier required during net banking. And as a result, what happened was more people started using UPI, people started using digital payments, people started doing online transactions. Right now, I don't know if you guys know about it, India is considered to be the country where the maximum number of online digital transactions take place, and no other country has this infrastructure called as UPI. Right, so that is how removing options or reducing steps can make a lot of difference. Now, this is a very broad example, but this is something that we as designers do this pretty much every time. So whenever we have a product, whenever we have to design a flow, design few screens, what we do is we create a task flow first. We try to analyze each and every single step, and we try to understand how we can improve it, how we can make it better. Okay. So Adilum, what we do is we find, let's say, number of decisions that has to happen in every page, something known as an interaction cost. We calculate an interaction cost, and we try to make sure that the interaction cost is as less as possible for any app, right? So this is one way in which you can definitely reduce friction, and you can definitely make your users quickly act upon anything that you want them to do, right? So when it comes to transactions, if you quickly want users to make a payment, this is how you do it. Okay. Now, moving to our next thing. Our next strategy is known as building valid defaults. This basically says that this is a very interesting way in which you can reduce friction. But what happens is, let's say you are giving your users with some default options. I don't know how many of you guys can see my cursor here. So recently, so before that, whenever you are making a microtransaction, which is small transactions using Google Pay, you have to enter a note, right? It's not a mandatory thing, but you can enter it so that you can later on go back and refer. You have this small area where you can enter notes, right? So recently, I think this, I'm not exactly sure about the date, but I think this happened this year only. Google Pay started introducing these small chips, or you can call them smart suggestions, where it identifies who your sender is, what are the different transactions that happens with that sender, and it quickly suggests few valid default options that you can use. അപ്പോൾ ഇവിടെ എന്താ ഉണ്ടാവുന്നതെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ, again, your interaction cost is being reduced, right? Now, instead of adding a note manually, you can instantly select an option that is readily available for you, right? Again, it is reducing the friction. I'm able to do, or I'm able to complete a task much more faster than how it used to be, right? And at the third, if you guys can see, my bank account is also selected by default. So I can obviously add multiple bank accounts, but again, it is selecting the my primary bank account as my default option. Now, again, that shows the power of default value, right? So in this screen, when a user comes, he has very few friction, very few interaction that needs to be done in order to complete this step, or in order to complete this transaction. So these are some amazing ways in which you can reduce friction. Okay, let's try to make this more interactive. Can someone suggest examples that you have seen online where you opened an app and it suggested something to you by default, which can be considered as valid default example? Anyone? Comments later, guys. There's no right or wrong. YouTube search, yes, very good, Arun. And then you start entering mail AI, yes.
I think even with Google Meet as well, the reaction part or the hand raising part.
Yeah, fair enough. That's true. That's also a very good example, Shivani. Good. We all use Swiggy, right? So when you open Swiggy, Swiggy automatically detects your location if you have given permission. That again is a valid default, right? Which is a very basic example, but makes a lot of difference. So if you look around, you'll find plenty of options where valid defaults are used in order to reduce the friction. Okay. I'll continue. So the next step that we have is known as split steps. Okay, this is a very common example that we keep using almost every day. So what happens is, so whenever we have a huge task in hand, which users need to perform, we need to make sure that we break it down into smaller steps. I had briefly discussed this in our previous session, So we have to break down a huge a task that involves multiple steps into smaller steps. And so what happens is the smaller the initial task, the more likely people will agree to do bigger tasks. That's a common mentality, common psychology that has been observed in all these years. Better. So, which is known as commitment and consistency. You can just read whatever is there on the screen. Getting users to make a small commitment and follow up on it can increase the engagement. So what it basically means is make users do small things first and then gradually ask people to do bigger things. And there was actually a study done by this organization called Crazy Act, and you can read about it later. I'll probably share the link on Discord. So they found out that multi-step forms are either a form that has multiple fields, which is divided into multiple steps, has a 271% better results than a big single step form, right? So again, so when you have a huge amount of tasks that needs to be done, break it down into smaller steps and make sure that your users are comfortable doing it. That's the whole point. Now, okay, a very good example of what something that we see almost in every application. So Spotify, we use Spotify, almost everyone uses Spotify. It's one of our favorite music streaming app. For example, Spotify, when we do an onboarding or when we sign up for the first time, you are asked to enter few details. Now, why they are doing this is pretty simple. They want us to have more personalized feed, right? They don't want uh, Arun's Spotify feed to look and feel as same as Shivani's Spotify feed, right? So they want to have a unique and more customized experience for every user because that again elevates the overall product experience. അതുകൊണ്ട് they want us to enter a lot of information as soon as a user signs up because that is the first interaction point with any app, right? The onboarding. അപ്പോൾ ഇതില്, as you can see, the first step is to enter email, which is a very basic step, right? And when you enter the email, when you continue, the next step is to enter your date of birth, which requires a slightly more interaction. A more interaction cost is involved, obviously, because there is a date picker and all those things. And once you do that, third step. So they have divided this into 3 steps. The third step is where you choose 3 or more artists you like, right? Again, this is to give you more personalized experience. Even as you can see, now that I can quickly recollect, Even they're not randomly showing you anything, right? They are giving you again, showing you default values again, so that you can quickly just select and continue. Even there is power of defaults, and they have divided this whole process into 3 different steps, right? So users feel much more comfortable when they are coming to your platform for the first time. So that's how everyone does. Now, this is a very common step that I think almost all the designers do. And since it's a very basic thing, but since we are learning UX for the first time, I just wanted to bring it out. And you take any app, their onboarding is being divided into simple steps purely because of this reason. Okay. The last one that we have over here is progressive disclosure. Okay, this is very interesting. So let's say you have an interface, Adil, there are multiple actions that you can perform. Let's say you have an app and there are different actions right on the home screen. So what you can do is, since when your users come to the app for the first time, make sure that you are gradually revealing your interface and gradually making them do different things. This is slightly different from multi-step also. So what happens is, in Tinder example, as you can see, when a user comes here for the first time, there are multiple things that a user can do. So once you onboard entirely, you'll get to see that. Users can like a profile, they can dislike a profile, they can, that happens using swipe right and swipe left. Users can also do something known as a super like, then there's a redo. So now there are multiple actions that comes here, right? So the learning curve is pretty high, and this is a comparatively different interaction than what we generally see on other applications, right? So what Tinder is doing is they're progressively disclosing the entire app's interface. So every time so for every user, whenever they onboard for the first time, whenever they come to the app for the first time, it progressively shows what this app does and what are the different actions that you can perform. So this kind of helps the user to shorten or to reduce the whole learning curve in this application, right? So this is one great example where progressive disclosure works. And there are, again, a million more examples, but I just wanted to show you something that I personally like. So to sum up, these are the different ways in which we can reduce the friction in order to make sure that our users are quickly acting on the information that they are seeing or acting on anything that we as designers or we as product owners, we as business owners want them to do, right? That is ultimately what we all want, to make sure that there's engagement. Now, once we have reduced friction, we have one more strategy known as using nudges. Okay, so what happens is there are three most popular types of nudges. Let's look at them one by one. I think some of you might have heard about nudges, but I'll show you an example. The first one is again user ratings and reviews, something that we briefly discussed when we were, I think, discussing interpret framework. Earlier, I think I showed you example of Airbnb, I guess. I don't remember. Yeah, so user ratings and reviews. So surprisingly, there is this weird social psychological phenomena where we kind of believe what others have to say. Like all of us are like that, because that is primarily because since they have had experience with the existing product, they are in a better position already. We're understanding on that. That is why we tend to believe them. And that is exactly how ratings and reviews work. Now, you can say it almost on any service providers, right? You have your e-com platforms, your Flipkarts, Amazons, your Olas and Ubers, and your everything, Swiggy, Zomato, everything. Whatever service they're providing, there's an option where there's a section where they show the ratings, and which again helps a user to act upon it, right? I can decide whether I need to go ahead with this or do I need to switch it. That's basically ratings and reviews, and almost all of us know this. The second is wisdom of crowd. Now, this is something that is very subtle and which brands like Flipkart and Amazons have been using. We don't realize it, but we see it. We just don't know what it is, right? So what they do is, so when a large number of people use a product, we kind of form an opinion about it, right? We kind of think that, okay, they're using this product, that basically means that there is something that is working. So we might tend to go ahead with ordering it, or with completing the checkout or whatever it is, right? Completing the service process. So that is basically what wisdom of the crowd is. So as you can see over here, this I think is Flipkart's some product page. I guess it was iPhone's product details page. There is a small section that says that 20,000 people have ordered this in the last 15 days. That's a huge number, right? So when we're just reading the product catalog, reading ratings and reviews, and when we also come across numbers like this, it kind of gives us that extra motivation to act quickly, right? Because now I know that whatever decision I'm making is credible, because there are more credible people who have already used this. And Amazon also does something similar. So I don't know if you have noticed, Amazon product like right below the product image catalog, they show that these many orders in the last week, and sometimes they also show that these many products have been added to the cart. That again is this type of nudge where you are prompting your users to quickly act, right? So that in turn they can generate revenue. That's how it works, right? We are basically doing all of this so that we can increase the engagement, increase the revenue, make our business better, right? So that's the whole point. Now the third one is people of interest. Now this is not directly related to digital experiences, but again, we have a lot of influencers online who talks about product, who suggests product, right? So we tend to believe them. We have a bias towards them. And even not only like celebrities or influencers, even our friends, when they tell you that, okay, bro, I have this product and it's very good, we tend to kind of believe them, right? So that's what people of interest basically means. That is also kind of social nudge, which is not directly related to any digital experience, but yeah, it is also another psychological factor. Moving ahead. Okay. The next strategy that you can use to nudge a user is known as curiosity gap. Now, very interesting concept this is. അതായത് നമ്മൾ ബ്ലോക്കിൽ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്തായിരുന്നു unexpected things captures our attention, right? And it kind of motivates people to take certain actions. That's what curiosity gap does. ഇതിൽ നമ്മൾ സ്വിഗ്ഗിയിൽ when you sign up for the first time, they show a screen where they say finish the next step to unlock 50% off and free delivery. So it is kind of creating a curiosity, and it is kind of rewarding the user, telling them that, okay, buddy, you do the next step, you are going to get rewarded, right? And we immediately complete the onboarding so that we can quickly collect the reward or the incentive that they are offering. Now, a lot of brands do this. Now, Swiggy could have done this in a normal way, right? They could have just asked the user to enter the name, which is what they want us to enter. But they do this by creating a nudge called as curiosity gap, right? So that is how different brands, even the smallest of things, have they are doing it differently so that their experiences is much better, and that is how they are psychologically affecting the users or improving our experience with any product. Mm, okay, I think we are almost there. Scarcity. Okay, scarcity is another interesting concept in nudges. I don't know if you have heard about it. Again, there's a very weird behavior, human behavior. Okay, so what happens is we tend to want more of things that we cannot have. For example, let's say anything is limited. That's how commonly we tend to behave. Okay, so now we as designers, we can leverage this behavior, and these are primarily of three types. You have a time limited, you have a quantity limited, you have access limited. For time limited is very simple. Either whatever you're doing, they'll show a timer. They'll tell you that once this timer runs out, you won't be able to complete the step, right? So when we see the timer, we have this anxiety within us. We want to, like Amazon sale. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Amazon sale, Flipkart sale. I don't know if you have noted. IRCTC loaned, I guess. When you're booking a train, there is a timer that runs out. I think it's some 10 minutes. I'm not sure. But all your flight booking application have this feature where as soon as you start booking, as soon as you start a booking, initiate a booking, they'll start the timer, right? So users tend to believe that they have shorter time and they have to complete this transaction or this process before the timer runs out, right? So we end up doing it. That is how brands are pushing the users to perform something or to act upon something. The next is quantity limited. I think this is very, very, very interesting because it's one of my favorite scarcity nudges. Quantity limited is what every e-commerce platform does. Okay, so what they do is, I don't know if you have noted, in the e-commerce, they show, right, just 2 products available, 3 products available. And then you have this immediate anxiety, right? You just quickly want to buy that and get done with it. So that is what quantity limited is. So, and access limited, again, what brands are doing nowadays is that they are not giving access to everyone. It's invite only. Either if I'm launching a product, I only give access to certain people. And what happens is, they'll start feeling that, okay, I'm missing out on something and I want to quickly get into that other group where access is there, right? So that is how brands are again utilizing this, psychological principle called scarcity. Now, one thing to note here is a lot of brands are also doing this not very ethically. So that's a whole different discussion that maybe we can do some other time. Either brands, okay, like for example, I don't know how much of it is true. E-commerce platforms, when you are about to buy a product, they show you that, okay, only few products available, last few products available. So we don't even know if it's actually the correct nudge that they are showing, or are those unethical ways of pushing the users to complete that checkout. So that's a completely whole different discussion. But these are the ways in which we get affected. These are the ways in which we are acting upon things that we see, right? That's the whole point of having this shown over here. With that being said, yeah, the variable example, and I don't know if you guys can see. So over here, right, I think this is Paytm's flight booking application. Over here, they're showing 2 seats left. And I don't know if you have noticed, the 2 seats left in the nudge is also right above the button where you are performing that action, right? So it is very closely associated to each other. That is how brands very strategically place these things also. Chumma randomly they know exactly where to place so that users can quickly act upon it. So obviously the idea is that you will understand these concepts now, and probably from our next sessions we'll start designing screens. Upon you can apply these principles, you can so that it improves your product. That is the whole concept. Okay, now with that, we are almost done with today's session, guys, because we just had 2 topics to discuss. The last one that we have to discuss is store. Now, again, going back to the BICE framework, when block when I saw an information, interpret things that got my attention, I've acted upon it. And I've just now we discussed various principles that can be used so that you help your users to quickly act, right? Because of the behavior that we discussed initially. Users have short attention span, users are very restless, users tend to switch different apps. So we want to avoid all those things, and we can apply the principles that we have just discussed. And there are many more which you guys can go back and read. And the last step is obviously to store. Now, we did discuss, right? There's something known as system one of storing. Either whenever we see something, we block, interpret, act, LM. So what happens is the more loops we go through, the more our brain registers these patterns, and these patterns are later on recollected. Okay. Either the more we see things, the more we interpret things, and the more we act upon things, it gets registered in our memory, and we form associations. Either we try to relate one memory with the other, right? That is exactly what happens in our brain, and these things can instantly be can quickly be recalled using a system one of memory that we have discussed in a previous session, right? So that is what generally happens. Apo, what happens in this process is, if let's say if the entire user journey or the entire experience or the entire pattern is very recognizable and enjoyable, it kind of forms something known as a habit. Okay, and that is how habit forming products are built. So the things that started as a very slow and deliberate decisions is now a very fast process. Okay, that is exactly how you form habit with any products. Nowadays, you cannot live without Instagram, right? Because Instagram has created this habit forming, ecosystem around the product. That is how strategically they are creating the applications. So there are few principles associating making our journeys more enjoyable and memorable. We'll just discuss one or two because there are plenty more which you guys can do it on your own. So that is what storage is all about. The first one is peak end rule, which is the most common principle that we are going to understand further also. So I am showing a word on my screen, right? It's vacation. Now, can you guys just quickly comment on the last thing that you remember about your vacation? It can be just one word, it can be anything. Like what comes to your mind when you see vacation? ചുമ്മാ എന്തുകൊണ്ടില്ല കേട്ടോ guys? Fun. കൊള്ളാം. Places, yes. വേറെ ആരുമില്ല, അതിന് മാത്രമേ വെക്കേഷൻ ഉള്ളൂ. Family. That's nice. Yeah. So basically what happens is whenever you see something, you try to you try to associate, travel. You try to associate things related to that word, right? It could be anything. It could be the food that you had while you were on your vacation. It could be memories that you had with your family. Shivani Varnal. It could be the travel. It could be the different places that you saw. It could also be miserable experiences that you have had. If ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ടീമിൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് പൂനെ വെക്കേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ, they might remember a lot of things that was not very fun, right? So that is the whole point. So what happens is, whether these memories are happy or miserable, the overall impression എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് is basically the things that we remember from our peak experiences. Now, peak could be both joy and sorrow, as well as the thing that had happened towards the end, right? So it is generally said that whenever we interact with any product, the things that gets recollected the most are the things that we experience during the peak of any journey and towards the end of that journey, right? So ഇതിന്റെ one very good example is, this is the insight. A cognitive bias that impacts how people remember past events, intense positive or negative moments, and the final moments of an experience are heavily weighted in our mental calculus. Anyway, I'm the same thing. So then the one very good example is from Airbnb. So what happens is, Airbnb, you can also become a host, right? You can host your property. So I've told you, right? This is a place where you can find home space. But നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒരു host ആവാം. Being a host is a very tedious, very taxing process because there are multiple steps that are involved. Okay, so you have to list your property. Property listing, there are different n number of steps. You have to pin the exact location. You have to enter your property's basic amenities, AC undo, geyser undo, iron box undo, mattress cot, whatever it is. You also have to list house rules, when is the check-in time, when is the check-out time. So and what else? So there are a lot of things that needs to be entered while you are listing your property on Airbnb, right? So it's a very taxing process. Now what happens is, towards the end, like towards the very end, you see this message or you see this video from their founder and the CEO, Brian Chesky. So he kind of, what he does is, there's a video that when you play that video, it basically says that he's congratulating us for being part of this whole family, right? So he's making us feel that we are also heard. He's making us feel included, right? Or a sense of belongingness when you hear something from the founder himself, and when they are congratulating us for being part of this whole community, right? So these are the things that that shoots the experience through the roof, because these are the things that generally brands don't do, right? And when you see something like this, it adds to my overall experience of being a host in Airbnb. And this happens towards the end. So that is exactly what peak and roll is. So you have to make sure that whenever you're designing a product, the peak experiences and your end experience is always memorable. Now, there are many different options, right? Google Pay, when you make a quick transaction, what happens? You see a check mark and ಮತ್ತೆ comfortable with him. That again brings in joy. It is very delightful to see, right? It has a very long lasting impression. So that is exactly how you can make sure that the things, when it happens, it has a long lasting effect on our memory. It immediately gets stored, right? And it has a stronger recall value also. So that is exactly what peek and tool is. Now we will, I'm sure you guys are going to again use this probably once we start designing screens in our coming modules. And the last one that I have for today is something known as a sensory appeal. So UX in general is not just related to the visuals that you see. It is also about the sounds, the motions, haptics, and all these things are known as delighters. Okay, so so the insight says that users engage more with the things that are appealing to them, to their multiple senses, right? Um, which is again known as delighters. For example, a delighter could be a sound or a motion or a haptic. So when you have delighters in your user journey, it creates a very, very positive experience. People remember them even more, right? I will just quickly play this audio and you have to tell me what it is.
Railway station
Yeah,
announcement.
exactly. Yeah, railway. Yes, correct. But we have not even seen who was the actual person who recorded this, right? And there is a further monologue after this. ഇതെവിടെ സംഭവിക്കുന്നത് നമുക്കറിയത്തില്ല, ഇതെങ്ങനെ സംഭവിക്കുന്നത് അറിയത്തില്ല, but we have a very strong recall value with this very particular sound, right? That is also because most of our childhood, or while we were growing, or still we are traveling on traveling on trains, right? And we have this very fond memory with this particular sensory appeal, right? So that is exactly how things get stored in our memory. So whenever you show them something, whenever make them experience something that adds more value to the other sensory, what do you say, inputs, it gets retained in our memory for a very long time, right? That is exactly what even brands are doing. Google Pay, you have that very amazing sound when you do a transaction. Paytm nowadays, all these small retailers have a sound box, right? അത് നമുക്ക് എവിടെ നിന്നാലും കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് അറിയാൻ പറ്റും, ഓക്കെ ട്രാൻസാക്ഷൻ ഇസ് ഡൺ and ഇത്രയും amount. Even your almost all examples, I think your Slack also, once you refresh, they have a very Twitter feed refresh, it has a very particular tone, and that again has a very instant recall value, right? So that is exactly how you guys can add much more value to any experience. Now either is something that will happen gradually over years of experience, because to add a sound or motion is something that requires a further more detailed understanding of UX. But I just wanted to let you guys know about how it creates a long lasting memory in our experiences and how it gets stored in our brain, right? So I think with that, we have come to the end of this entire module of understanding psychology. So let's just do a quick recap. What happens? We instantly block things that we see because our brain does not like doing a lot of hard work. That is what we discussed. We interpret things that we like or that grabs our attention. We quickly act we act on the things that we're supposed to do or any action that we're supposed to take. And few of those things that has those extra delightfulness or extra joy gets stored in our memory. So this is an overall summary of what really happens when we interact with any product, when we experience any product. With that, I think we have concluded this module. If you guys have any questions, we can quickly take up that. Any questions, anyone? I'm guessing no questions. And we don't have any tasks for today's session because I think review session task is still pending. People are yet to submit, few of them at least. So we will be evaluating based on that. And we also have Sachin and Manas here with us today. So they'll be taking your next module, which is about understanding the user. And from our next module, we will start this whole our design journey. So whenever we want to design something, the first step is to understand our users, right? I think Malachichi has been emphasizing on this. And that is exactly what you're going to learn from next module. And it is going to be really fun, guys. So I hope all of you can join for the next session as well. With that, I think we can conclude. If you don't have any further questions, maybe we can meet next week. Thank you, guys. Anyone has any?
Boy, anyone have any doubts?
No doubts. എല്ലാവർക്കും എല്ലാം അറിയാം.